Hey Jimmy, come here. Look at that kiddo. So Mats is supposed to be presenting. I haven't heard back from him, but he had emailed me yesterday, so I'm sure he'll be along. I don't quite know what's holding him up at the moment, but he should be getting there. So,
anybody want to introduce themselves? So,
yeah, if everybody wants to go ahead and introduce themselves, that would be great.
I'm Tim Hopper. I'm at the University of Victoria in BC, and I work in teacher education and complexity theory as a learning frame of understanding how we learn to teach.
I'm Jesse Rhodes. I typically organize this stuff, so I'm the one that keeps emailing everybody. I work at the University of North Dakota. We're just starting our winter, so it just started to get cold. And it's going to get interesting pretty quick.
I'm Ethan. I'm at the University of Edinburgh and doing my PhD in community education and outdoor education.
Okay, I'm Anli, and I'm PhD student in University of Edinburgh as well. And I introduced Ethan to join this meeting because my supervisor Nicola, she's not be able today, introduced me this meeting because I'm trying to think about whether the complexity thinking will be used in my dissertation or not. So nice to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet you. I am Elizabeth. Please call me Beth. I'm from São Paulo. I am professor in São Judas University. I live in São Paulo, and I apologize because my English is very, very bad, and I try to accustomate to understand.
Thank you. And?
Hello?
Matt?
Hi. I can't hear you. Let me see. There. Hi. Sorry, guys. Actually, the Norwegian time is 4 o'clock. We adjusted the time on Saturday this week.
Time difference.
So I had the wrong time. Sorry.
So sorry, that's one of the major issues with trying to coordinate people on different sides of the planet. You don't know who's on daylight savings time, and it's all a little bit, so you try to get it as good as possible. So we are really, I'm really thankful, Matt, you were able to go ahead and accommodate us being a little bit off, and apologies.
Yeah.
Luis is, go ahead.
We can blame the farmers for that daylight saving.
Yeah.
It looks like we have one more person. Louise, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
Hello.
Who you are, Louise, and where you from?
I'm in Fortaleza, and I believe you already met Elizabeth, a friend of mine, a colleague from São Paulo. Okay. We are facing tough times in Brazil, but it's a relief to meet with you guys again. A long time since last time.
Right. Nice to see you again, Louise. Okay, went quiet. Jesse, you quiet.
There we go. I turned my microphone off. When we have this many people, it's really it's if everybody when Matt starts, if we can turn so if you mute your microphone, it just helps with the feedback and everything. So that's kind of why I've been turning mine on and off. But Matt, do you want to go ahead and begin your presentation?
Yeah. I just need to make everything. So, have people read the manuscript, or you have time? You have had time to read it, or? because I made a presentation and I'm thinking of going through the presentation, but then I was curious about the results because we are trying to show the processes. So I was thinking of reading some of the results to kind of show the process instead of speaking about it, but because I think that's a better way of showing the process. So that's a bit up to you guys. Let's see.
One thing, Matt, I noticed your sound goes in and out. So the closer you are to your computer, the clearer you are.
Yeah. Can you see my screen now? Yeah. Okay. So let's begin. So this is the last paper on my PhD. So I want to recognize my two supervisors. So that was Anne McPhail from the University of Limerick and Tore Rongland from the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences. That's my university. So as I said, this is I have published four one book chapter and 3 articles from my PhD, and this is the last one. And it's almost accepted in Journal of Teaching and Teacher Education. So I need to make some minor revision, but it should be accepted soon. So that's the presentation for today. And I want to some of you joined Al Owens' presentation on complexity theory and complexity thinking, and what we're trying to do in this article is to show and exemplify the complexity. So we're trying to show relationality, interactivity, and how different elements are co-producing practice and learning. We're really trying to show and explicate the complexity. So first, some background. So in general, teacher educators are understudied. It's coming more and more studies, but still we are a quite understudied field. And Knight et al. Also asked for more research on teacher education, teacher educators, and again asking for researchers to explicate the complexity. And when we talk about learning for teacher educators, we usually talk about how they learn in their practice. So we are learning about teaching. And when we talk about the practice, so we talk about teaching about teaching, that's the teacher educators. And the pre-service teachers are learning about teaching, and they are learning about learning. So when we talk about teacher educator practice, it's the interrelated relationship between those elements in teacher education. And last, the professional development of teacher educators are growing, and the self-study methodology that I'm using in this study is, of course, used by a lot of teacher educators, but seldom they are considering the interrelated relationship between teaching about teaching and learning about teaching. Most self-studies are considering the teacher educator's voice and not the pre-service teacher's voice. And in this study, we are considering both voices. And then Katie Strum and Adrian Martin asked for studies that consider the practice and learning as complex, relational, and interactive, and how the processes in practice is emerging, or what happens in practice and what produce practice. So that's the background. And we developed a research question. So how does a teacher educator negotiate his learning and practice as he develops a pedagogy of teacher education? So And this is me, so this is my self-study. So how does I negotiate my learning and practice as I develop a pedagogy of teaching? And we used rhizomatics and particularly the concept of assemblage to understand the interactive and relational processes in my practice and learning. And rhizomatics allow us to consider how human elements, material elements, and non-tangible forces are interacting and co-producing practice and learning. So it's not about the teacher educator as an autonomous person doing teaching, but it's more about how different elements are interacting in a particular way, in a particular setting, to produce something. And in this case, producing my teacher educator practice and my learning and the pre-service teachers learning. So going a bit closer, so we have the physical space, the sports hall, for example, that influence, for example, in this case, the sports hall have certain markings that tend to say how one should do the sports, for example. And we have the pre-service teachers with their background. We have the tradition of the university and of the course and the program. Material influences like the sport education model in this case, and the teacher education or the pedagogy of teacher education. For example, Loughran's book on developing a pedagogy of teacher education, and myself as a teacher educator. So assemblage, the concept of assemblage allows us to consider how these elements and forces are interacting and producing the classroom assemblage. And the classroom assemblage is again then producing the practice and learning. So as I said, this was a self-study of teacher education practices. So I studied my own practice of teaching pre-service teachers about teaching. It was in the 3-year undergraduate PE program, 21 third-year pre-service teachers, and the specific setting was PE course in games or ball games, as we say in Norway. So the first period of the course was 13 lessons. Then the pre-service teachers went out to school placement, 3 + 3 weeks. And then they came back to the university, and I had the last period of the games course. And my goal was to teach pre-service teachers about teaching the sport education model.
What does 3 + 3 mean, Matt?
So they went into school placement 3 weeks before Christmas and then 3 weeks after Christmas.
Okay.
And they taught sport education in one class for 6 weeks. So they did other kind of teaching, but then they did the sport ed in one class each week. And my overall pedagogy was I modeled teaching of sport education as a school teacher, and the pre-service teachers experienced the model as students or pupils in school. I was thinking aloud to try to provide pre-service teachers insights into especially why of teaching. So why did I have different roles? Why did they work in stable teams, for example? And also as a part of providing insights into the what, how, and why, was writing a reflective diary. So that I shared with the pre-service teachers after it was lesson 6, I think. I shared the reflective diary. And in the end of, because I divided the lessons, the 90-minute lessons into 2 main parts. The first part was modeling teaching and sport education. In the last 20 minutes, we discussed my modeling of the model and pre-service teachers' experience of experiencing the sport education model. And in these discussions, I allowed them to question the model, to criticize my teaching of the model, and to clarify any questions they had about the model. And then lastly, the coursework was connected to both my teaching in the PED course and their school placement. So they had to reflect on their teaching of sport ed in school placement. And data generation, we recorded with a videotape and corresponding microphone on me all my lessons. So that was 50 hours of teaching. And I wrote reflect diary during the course and during planning for the course and during planning for each lesson. And we conducted focus groups. So we conducted focus groups after the first period and before school placement, and then in between school, after school placement, and then after the second period of PED course again. So 3 focus groups with the pre-service teachers. And then it was 3 groups, so 3, so 9 in total. And then data analysis. Here I want to acknowledge Katie Ström. I learned a lot from reading her work, and I also she was also teaching me. So we were in dialogue with her during the analysis. So we used much of her work as a guide for my analysis. So we used, not going in depth into this, but this was actually a 9-month process. So we started off with data walking, where we went through all the data and coded inductively. Then I made rhizomatics maps. So and that was in the last of the article. So I made 1 map for each lesson, trying to see the connections and interactions happening in the lesson, producing the practice. Then I made 1 map for each of the 3 periods. So the first period of the PED course, PST's experience of school placement, and the last part of the PED course. Then I made 1 synthesized map, trying to see interactions and relations between the 3 periods. Then use situational analysis to try to capture the what and how, so what, where in the situation, what influenced the practice, and also try to make sense of the negotiations and interactions between, so more writing about what actually happened and where were the negotiations in the setting. And then lastly, a lot of writing. So trying to write out the interactions in each of the 3 periods, and then finally write out the interactions between the 3 periods again. So within and between the 3 periods. And then to results. So we present 3 main results. So first we discuss how the material and non-tangible elements influence my practice and the pre-service teacher's learning. Then when we present how I negotiated the material non-tangible elements with the pre-service teachers, and then how I internally, or how I negotiated the elements with myself. So first we saw that the nature of teacher education pedagogy provided expectations in my practice. So wanting to teach pre-service teachers about teaching, I felt a need to teach about the what, like the sport education model, how to teach the model, and why of that model. So as I said, why teams, why roles, why I'm standing here, and etc. So the nature of pedagogy was influencing how I was teaching, and also then influencing the pre-service teachers' experiences, because they were used to a focus on especially the what and maybe the how, but not the why. So they were not used to discussing and reflecting teaching. They were used to experiencing different games. And then the sport education model was new to both me and the pre-service teachers. And sport ed is a quite comprehensive and complex model. And then interacting with my limited experience, it influenced my teaching. And as I'm saying that the model was playing with me in the beginning, I was not playing with the model, but the model was playing with me. What's the word? Well, I needed to follow the model in a way, and the model was also new and quite different from the previous experiences of the pre-service teachers. And then the tradition of the program. So as I said, it was the same teacher educator had taught the same course for many years, and the tradition was quite set on focusing on games and the content on games, and not so much on the pedagogy. And the pre-service teachers, of course, knew about the tradition and had and that developed or produced expectations for them taking into the course. I knew about the program tradition and knew what the pre-service teachers was expecting. So what we found was that these three material non-tangible elements, like the tradition is non-tangible, and the material of the sport education model and Lochren's book actually on developing teacher education was really influencing and constraining my practice, especially in the beginning of the course. And then turning to how I negotiated with the pre-service teachers these three material non-tangible elements. So I think, as I said, I think I will read to really try to show because in the results chapter we try to explicate the complexity and try to show how these elements are interacting and producing my practice and producing the pre-service teachers and my learning experience. So I will, let's see. Okay, so the first university period. Because of their sport background, pre-service teachers were used to experiencing mastery in physical education, combined with their unfamiliarity with sport education and strong expectations of the course content and practice. Pre-service teachers became critical of Marcus's, that's me, practice in the beginning of the first period. As a way to develop a meaningful relationship between teaching and learning, Marcus tried to negotiate his practice with the pre-service teachers. We observed how he primarily relied on two strategies in the first university period: interacting with and allowing pre-service teachers a voice, and displaying uncertainty and vulnerability. So first, continuously interacting with the pre-service teachers. Marcus was trying to make the pre-service teachers acknowledge the sport education model, his lesson structure, and practice that was articulating the what, how, and why. For example, we observed how he encouraged pre-service teachers to contribute to the discussion, asking questions like, what's your thoughts about that? Or commenting that it's very positive that we are critical and consider if there's something we can do differently. Specifically, the discussion at the end of all lessons provided an arena for him to negotiate with the pre-service teachers. He experienced encourage pre-service teachers to reflect on and question both the sport education model, his teaching of the model, and their experiences as learners. The following excerpt from a lesson show how Marcus's practice allowed pre-service teachers to scrutinize his teaching, while providing an opportunity for him to adapt the sport education model, the lesson structure, and practice. Mary, do we get enough time to practice, be physically active? Someone had measured that we are sitting still 50 minutes of last lesson. Marcus, that's a very interesting observation, but remember that the student lesson, him modeling teaching, lasts 70 minutes out of 90 minutes. However, it's certainly a balance. I'm not afraid of talking so much here, because my goal isn't that you should have a lot of physical activity, but that you learn how to teach. It's important that you know that you're not here to have a physical education lesson. You're here to learn how to teach. Second, the vulnerability of Marcus's practice functioned as a negotiation strategy in itself. For example, he allowed pre-service teachers to scrutinize his practice both in the lessons and in the focus groups, while further trying to acknowledge pre-service teachers' shared experiences and suggestions. The discussion referred to above made it clear for Marcus that many of the pre-service teachers misunderstood the rationale behind the lesson structure. Consequently, he started the next lesson repeating the structure while also changing a few things in his practice. Marcus's acknowledgement of pre-service teachers' needs and concerns made pre-service teachers feel that they had a voice in the teaching and learning environment. Caroline explained, "We are being taken seriously. I feel my voice means something here." Furthermore, Marcus decided to share his reflective diary with the pre-service teachers. Having struggled to provide insights into the nature and uncertainty of teaching, we noticed how this facilitated exploration of the relationship between teaching about teaching and learning about teaching. Scott explained, "When he reflects on why he did as he did, justifies his choices, that makes me think, would I have done it in the same way? Or that was a good solution." This interaction, allowing and acknowledging pre-service teachers' beliefs and displaying Marcus's vulnerability, fostered a more meaningful practice and engagement. Jack explained how Marcus's practice enabled his relationship with the pre-service teachers. It's important that we don't experience that there is one correct answer. For example, when Marcus experienced that he could do something different, we discussed it in groups and experienced that there is no one answer, but multiple. It depends on the situation and the different aspects that are involved. This contributes to the relationship between the teacher educator and pre-service teachers, a good dynamic in the learning process. As supported by the experts above, our analysis on ways that we're constantly interacting with and allowing pre-service teachers a voice, while displaying uncertainty and vulnerability, produced conditions where pre-service teachers started to acknowledge Marcus's teaching practice, and perceived him not only as an expert teacher educator, but as a human and learner in a similar way to how they position themselves. This resulted in growing relationship between Marcus and pre-service teachers, and combined with their growing experience with the sport education model, the interaction between the conflicts of human, material, and non-tangible elements changed. The conflicts of elements were co-producing meaningful relationships between teaching about teaching and learning about teaching. Then the second period. Our analysis of the second university period conveys the way pre-service teachers' evolving experiences, that is, the first university period and their school placement, interacted with the other elements in the setting and produced both enabling and constraining conditions in Marcus's practice and the relationship between teaching and learning. Particularly, pre-service teachers' previous learning experiences made them believe that they had successfully completed their education of the sport education model. In the focus groups, before the second university period, they therefore strongly encouraged Marcus to focus on the content of multiple games and pay less attention to the model as such. Subsequently, the interaction between the course tradition of focus on content of games and pre-service teacher expectations, combined with Marcus's stretching to align his practice with the pre-service teacher's need and concern, co-produced a setting where most pre-service teachers valued the second period as the most worthwhile for them as prospective teachers. As one pre-service teacher explained, I absolutely agree that it has been a lot better in the second period. This was what I expected. Learn new games that would allow me to bring innovative things into school. However, while pre-service teachers showed high enthusiasm when practicing the games, the interactions between the complex of elements in the setting produced conditions where they showed limited engagement when Marcus tried to encourage them to discuss features of the sport education model or the nature of teaching. This lack of enthusiasm constrained Marcus's practice, but in which he tried to negotiate with the pre-service teachers about the relationship between the content of games, sport education, and the nature of teaching. We observed how Marcus carried out multiple strategies in trying to encourage and engage pre-service teachers in this endeavor. For example, as a way to connect some of the contextual struggles pre-service teachers had experienced in school placement, he developed pedagogical packages that included a document describing an imaginary context and accompanying model materials. Marcus used the package as a starting point for his teaching in trying to engage pre-service teachers and allow them to appreciate multiple ways the model could be adapted and modified. Another strategy was to provide pre-class reading of a particular feature of the sport education model that he further integrated into the lesson and discussed at the end of lessons. However, the tradition of both the course and program university no expectations of reading before practical lessons influence pre-service teachers' expectations. Combined with their evolving learning experience, pre-service teachers rarely read literature, showed low enthusiasm towards the model features, and in discussions about the nature of teaching. This co-produced conditions where Marcus struggled to develop a worthwhile relationship between teaching about teaching and learning about teaching. Abby's comments provide insight into the ways pre-service teachers' evolving experiences, effort, and expectations worked against Marcus's effort to engage them in more depth discussions about the sport education model and the nature of teaching. I felt I had used a lot of time learning about sport education. It was more motivated to learn about games. I think I would have learned more if I, for example, had read the literature and involved myself more in discussion. But we didn't care to pay attention to all the different elements he introduced. So that was how I negotiated with the pre-service teachers and how I negotiated the material and non-tailable elements. So I'm not sure if do you want me to more talk about my internal negotiations, or do you want me to read to have an even more in-depth look into the processes? What do you prefer?
Question for you.
Yeah.
How does the assessment system, the grading practices of the university impact what you just described?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think it's because it was pass or fail. So the examination was the coursework. So they were examined on the coursework, and also the school placement is also pass and fail.
So what is a pass? What's the expectation, and is it possible to fail?
It is possible to fail, but I provided continuously feedback on the coursework, so it was difficult to fail, but it should be possible to fail, yes. And the coursework was connected to my teacher. So yeah.
So what I was thinking by asking the question is, students don't read in programs where they minimize their reading to get a mark.
Yeah.
But in pass-fail programs, they're not reading either, by what you just described, because they're not interested, or I'm just trying to play it out. They've got too much reading to do. I mean, what's the ecosystem of your program? I mean, you're not the only course, right? So why aren't they reading is an interesting question I'm now asking. If you're saying there's no threat to not reading, right?
Yeah, but I think that's a good point, and I've tried this year. I've tried to connect that they are more working with the literature and connecting my teaching to the literature. So,
I mean, are they accountable in any way for that reading? I'm in a program where we do grading, and I don't like the grading, so I do contract grading, right? So I sort of create the pass-fail notion. But to get the B+, which is what they all after, because it's a normal grade, acceptable, I flip my class and I do quizzes, and the quizzes are, you've got 2 weeks to pass the quiz, and the quiz is based on the reading, and the reading's associated with what I'm doing in the class. So I know that some of them try to minimize the reading just to pass the test, and then they don't quite get the 80%, and then they go back over the reading, and basically they read because they have to. Pass the test. But in doing that, they start using the language in my class, and then I can pick up on it.
Yeah.
That's the only way I've managed to con them into reading, in a way.
Yeah.
But I've tried to make it possible for me to check their reading, bearing in mind I want to also give choice in their reading, so I try to bring that in as well. Anyway, just trying to connect, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily conning, though. Essentially, what you've done there is you've set up a constraint by which they have to go through that, right? They have to meet that objective. They have to do that. The emergence within their process is, hey, I have to read, and I'm going to read until a point where that constraint lacks up on that a little bit. That's the way I read that system.
I mean, I just was reflecting, because Matt's the same problem is getting students to read, bearing in mind that asking 30 or 24 or 21 students to read the same thing at the same time that will be interesting, all 21, we know can't be possible. But we also know we need a common language for redundancy for the system to communicate with itself. So we're trying to create a way in which the agents of that system can think differently because of the language we're giving them. So it's trying to get them to read for the purpose of imagining their practice, like you're describing, in a way that we are now studying the teaching and learning process. So the reading becomes a critical redundancy in our system, right?
Yeah. So do you want me to explain or read through the how I negotiate my internal negotiation?
I think we probably, instead of reading through it, I think it'd probably be more helpful just to explain, and then if you could, kind of engage in a dialogue with you about your findings. I think that would be really helpful to everybody.
Yeah. So my internal, because we call it my different practice ambition. So I try to teach different from my established teaching practice. So my former practice was quite traditional and teacher-centered. I was teaching different from the program and course tradition, and then also different from the pre-service teachers' expectations. And we could see how I needed, and then the different practice ambition interacted with the pre-service teachers, so their expectations and their background from physical education and their experience with the PEAT program. and is also interactive with the sport education model, as I've explained, and the tradition of the course. So I need to negotiate between my own personality, the sport education model, and the former and current my former and current philosophy. So what was prominent in my reflected diary was optimality or perfectionism. So when my personality interacted with the sport education model and the nature of teaching. So as I said before, the sport education model is quite comprehensive, and if you want to articulate the what, how, and why in teaching, that's also quite comprehensive. So my optimality or perfectionism made me unsure in my teaching, because I felt I had to teach the sport education model perfectly, and when the model was so comprehensive, it constrained my teaching, and as I said before, the model was playing with me and I was not playing with the model. But also because of my experience, so I'm in my teaching now, I'm more familiar with the model and are more able to play with the model myself. And then I also try to change. So as I said, I had my former practice was more teacher-centered and a focus on physical activity as physical education as more activity lesson. So a focus on high activity level, and sport ed is high activity but still something else. So I need to negotiate with my practice. So now I was not trying to be so concerned about high activity level and considering activity as something else, not physical activity, but you can be active by taking a different role, a coach role, a journalist role, etc., and be active in the learning experience. So that was also part of my negotiations, how I could not focus, because I was stressed when I experienced the pre-service teachers that they were that they wanted high activity level, and myself I was also feeling that I needed to have a high activity level. As a teacher, I want high activity, so I need to try to balance and reflect on, okay, is it necessary to have high activity, or should I push it? Should I use 20 minutes to discuss and reflect, and allow pre-service teachers to be critical towards my teaching, and stay in the uncomfortable environment. And also with the sport education, also I won't quote because the student-centered way was new and the sport education model was new. So as I wrote in my reflected diary, I often feel it's a chaos. I'm running back and forth. However, maybe that's not wrong. I have to develop my own way of teaching, modeling teaching on the model. However, sometimes I would have preferred having some preference. So I was feeling that the model was playing with me, and I was running back and forth and wanting to have high level of activity. But then I was also curious about, okay, so how is teaching of sport education look like, because I haven't seen it before. So and that was also part of my perfectionism, that I thought I had to teach in a specific way to call it sport ed. So then my perfectionism.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Why did you do sports ed then? Because you have like a limited experiential background with the model.
Yeah.
So what did you have to choose that, or why didn't you choose a cooperative model or a TGFU model, or a social responsibility model?
Yeah. I think it was different reasons. So because of my sports background, so I have a master's in coaching and psychology, and been working as a team handball coach. And so my interest was in sports before I started my PhD. And then Anne became my co-supervisor, and she had worked with the sport ed model. So I think that I couldn't have picked any model, and if I could have picked again, I wouldn't have picked the sport ed model. But that was probably why I chose to use the sport ed model, and I thought that could be one model that the pre-service teachers could like or get into, because they are sports persons. So yeah, that was why that was the connections that made me choose the sport ed model and my background. So this was really a struggle in the first period of the course. So going into so it was a lot of frustration, uncertainty in the first period, because of the different elements interacting and creating this uncertainty in my practice, and not feeling that or creating uncertainty for me that also was created by the pre-service teachers, what they said in lessons, and because I allowed them to criticize my teacher and criticize the sport ed model, so I could really feel the tension and the tension between the pre-service teachers and myself. So after the fifth lesson, and that's what we write in the last part of the first period. So today's experience made me feel like a beginner. Was this difficult to cope with the situations that occurred, and I got a bad feeling inside me? Here I'm going to be a good example of a teacher, and I can't even teach pre-service teachers. How can I teach them how to teach when I don't feel confident? So I was really feeling like unconfident and uncertainty because of the tradition, because of the comprehensiveness of the sport ed model, because of the pre-service teachers and their expectations, and because of my perfectionism and knowing about, or also being influenced by the tradition and knowing about pre-service teachers' expectations and feeling the expectations in the lessons. But what we see is that during the first period, I get more and more confident as we get more and more experience with the sport ed model, and the students, the pre-service teachers understand my pedagogy, my overall pedagogy. It took them 6 lessons to understand that I had 70 minutes modeling first, and then a 20-minute discussions where they were reflecting as pre-service teachers and not as students. So, but because they were allowed to criticize my teaching, I got insights into them not understanding my pedagogy. So by allowing them a voice, I was able to adjust my teaching to their needs and concerns. So going into the second university period, then as I said before, I because of the high degree of uncertainty and what's the English word? The high degree of uncertainty in the first period, I need to align my practice. I felt I need to align to not have some resistance. Sorry, yeah. So because the resistance was really high in the first period, I wasn't able to, or I kind of noticed and thought that it was not possible to have that high degree of resistance in the second period. So I aligned my practice with pre-service teachers' needs and concerns, and then also align my practice with the course tradition. So and this allowed now the elements were playing together differently. So the tradition was now interacting with the pre-source teachers and myself in a positive way, that it was now producing pleasantness, and the pre-source teachers were getting what they expected in the course, and we're happy with that. And I was teaching in a way because I was more focusing now on the content games. So I was teaching something that was more familiar with for me, because I was used to teach about the content of games as a former team handball coach and PE teacher. So you can see how the interaction between the elements were now producing some kind of pleasantness, and not as much resistance. So as I'm saying, after lesson 22, so that was almost the last lesson. I'm unsure whether it's because I teach in a more familiar environment, focused content, or whether it's because I become more confident in the role as a teacher educator, or if it's because I now know the pre-source teachers better, but I feel less stressed both before and during lessons. We can see how my experience, the pre-source teacher experience, developing experience, the more familiar environment, and the tradition was interacting and, as I said, producing more confidence and not that much resistance in the practice.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
You're teaching games. That's not a I mean, that's just an activity. Are you using a TGFU approach, a direct skill instruction approach? Are you drawing on Mostyn's teaching styles? What's the other thing other than games that you're using to teach teachers how to teach?
Well, I used ideas from TGFU. So I used ideas from TGFU and ideas from the sport and model, and how to teach games. So, but I didn't use any particular, because I was still trying to teach about the sport ed model, but the focus was more on learning new games. So we had Ultimate Frisbee, we had the Korfball, some new games, which it was more about learning the game, and then connect some aspects of the sport and model.
So it was like a multi-activity games model with a bit of tactical concepts, but still using team roles.
Yeah, I would say so. And that was, as I said, more familiar for me. So that was why it was more pleasant for me in this environment, and it was also more pleasant for the pre-source teachers. And it's interesting because the pre-source teachers are saying that this was what they expected and they learn more in this period. But I experienced the opposite. I think they learned more about being a teacher in the first period and not in the second. And hopefully I can follow them up in some years and follow them up and see if they reflected on something else, or how they can use this and what they use in the teaching. I don't think they're teaching the sport ed model, but maybe they learned about being a teacher, the uncertainty of teaching, for example. So that could be an interesting follow-up study.
Hey, Mats.
Yeah.
Is there any way we could have, if anybody has any questions right now for you, could we, because usually we do more of a, we do some questions along the way.
Yeah.
If we could do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have any questions offhand? Okay, well then.
Well, Tim had some, so. Yeah, so then to the discussion. So we have 3 main discussions points. So we discussed my classroom assemblage, so that considering how the different elements are showing how a classroom assemblage produce my teaching and the pre-service teachers' learning experience. And we're trying, because the formal literature have mostly discussed separate elements. So they just discussed the pre-service teachers, or they have discussed the socialization of the pre-service teacher, or the socialization of the teacher educator, but not how different elements are interacting and producing the practice. And then we also then again discuss how, and I've kind of said this already, but discuss how the sport education model and especially the tradition was influencing my practice, and the tradition, and this is connected to the last point, that the tradition was changing during the course. So the tradition is not stable in itself, but it's changing as it interacts with the different elements. So in the first period, the tradition was interacting with the pre-service teachers' expectations and my expectations, and the sport education model that was not in line with the tradition in the course, and this was producing negative experiences. So the tradition was constraining the practice in the first period, and then the elements were changing during the course, and your different experiences, different use of the model, and then you see in the second period again the tradition's forces are changing as it interacts with the different nature of myself, or my different teaching approach, the pre-service teachers' expectations, that they get what they expected, and then the tradition and the co-production are again changing, if you understand. So we try to say that because in the literature there are, and Loughran is talking a lot about understanding the interrelated relationship between teaching about teaching, so the teacher educator, and the learning about teaching, the teacher. But we're saying in the article that we need to consider the classroom assemblage. So it's more about it's more than the interrelated relationship between teaching and learning about teaching. You have to consider all the different material and non-tangible elements in the teaching and learning environment. So it's not only about the teacher, educator, and the pre-service teachers, but the assemblage in total. And the same for the tensions that Barry are talking about. So the different tensions that teacher educators experience, and they're often talking about that the tensions are produced by the interaction between the teacher educator and the pre-service teachers. But again, we're suggesting that the tensions are produced by the classroom assemblage. Yeah, any questions?
Hi, Nicola.
Hi, I was just going to ask about what you're talking about, just thinking in complex terms about the ideas of connectedness and relationships. Is it over time, is the relationships and the connectedness with the students been really important? Because that's something I feel from my perspective as a teacher educator can often be missing, because I don't see it's not like when I was teaching, where I would have a group of people that I would work with and would build relationships with, and it's that not being able to build relationships that I think sometimes makes teacher education difficult, because we can't practice what we preach, if you like, about the importance of relationships. I don't know if you managed to do that, or if you find that significant, or
so the developing relationship between me and the pre-service teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we found that a lot in the first, or especially in the first period, because I didn't knew them from before. I knew a couple of them, not the entire group. So by sharing the uncertainty I experienced in my teaching and sharing my reflected diary with the pre-cert teachers, that really allowed me to engage in a meaningful relationship with the pre-cert teachers. So yes, and that kind of allowed us to be able to discuss and negotiate the tradition. So they, by providing uncertainty and developing the relationship with the pre-cert teachers, we were able to negotiate the forces of the tradition. So they kind of accepted my pedagogy in the first period, and they accepted learning about the sport ed model and not games.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as a way to keep the good relationship with the pre-cert teachers, I decided not to continue pushing them in the second period, because they were asking to learn more about games. They were asking to, because they experienced that they were finished and had learned the sport ed model. So as a way to retain the relationship with the pre-cert teachers, I in a way gave them what they wanted.
Yeah.
Can
I think also what you're saying, I mean, I do self-study as well, and I do find it really helps, from what you're saying about the self-study, it helps you to open yourself up, and as you say, to share with the students the process that you were going through, share your journal. I think that's where I think self-study can really help you as a teacher educator to open yourself, to put yourself in that situation and develop that communication which is required, and those relationships and connections. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and it's really modeling lifelong learning.
Yeah.
So
the question I had to ask you, Mats, was how did the field experience in between your teaching influence that second half? How connected to that field experience were you, as in drawing on it as a way of creating more authenticity to your teaching, or making your teaching more credible in their eyes? Because you teach at university, they go out to school, they come back. What is the interaction happening between the slight transformation for them on their field experience, and they come back to university as a different student now, interacting with you as a practicing teacher?
Yeah. Well, they had a lot of different experiences in school placement. So that was also really interesting. And we have one article on that, but because someone was meeting students that were willing, or pupils that were willing to accept the sport ed model, because it was new to them as well. And they had different kind of sports halls. They had different kind of cooperative teachers that were more or less positive or negative to the sport ed model. So they had a lot of different experience with the model that again influenced their experience in the last period of the course. So that was how their experience influenced the last period. And my engagement, I went out to observe, as part of my job, I went out to observe 2 students teaching 1 lesson in sport ed, but that was the only connection between me and the pre-cert teachers during school placement. I had set up on the learning platform that they could ask questions on the learning platform, but nobody did. But so it's not really a collaboration between the university or the teacher educators and the school. I'm not sure if that was answer to your question, but yeah.
Well, the reason I was asking is, if we treat them as a self-organizing system, their structure is going to change based on what you've tried to do, but then it will then either reset or change again based on the field experience. So I was interested, my next question was going to be how well connected were they with each other, as in a trusting, sharing, prior to going out in the practicum, so they might draw on each other's resource in order to help? Or if they weren't really well connected, then they will still operate like individuals on a practicum and then come back to be students.
Yeah.
So what is that? What's that identity you're forming with them before they go out that maybe would support their practices in the school?
Yeah, that's a good point. And to try to do to try to facilitate collaboration. And so first of all, the coursework was group work. So they developed a unit plan for the school placement. So it was a group of 5 to 6 students that had the same course or the same unit plan, but they had to modify, of course, to the context. And there are pair or group of resource teachers going into the school placement. But this was 21 of a class of 35 or something. So someone was paired up with students that hadn't experienced the sport module or course. But I think that's really important, and I think we have a lot to do to allow them to collaborate also in school placement and be able to try new things.
It's interesting what Tim was saying, and Max, in your sport education route. What in Edinburgh, our first year students, when they first come in, they get a sport education experience. So we teach through sport education to the students, because of the place where they're coming from, just from school. Where their head is at the kind of competition in the sport, and so we teach through that. Through sport ed at the very start of their first year, and we've done that for 2 or 3 years, I think now, and it actually works very well to bond the students and get them thinking about and giving them a common experience that we can then start to unpack, because they then start to look at and for people who are mainly secondary focused, they then start to look at primary physical education. So we get the buy-in before we go for the primary aspect that they might not be that interested in. But teaching through sport ed has been quite successful for us here, of getting buy-in from the students from the very start and picking up their starting point and where they're at.
And I'm actually I'm starting to go, or maybe going away from modeling teaching actually.
Yeah.
Because what are we modeling if we're not thinking that it's one way of teaching? So why should we then model an expert way of teaching sport ed? So this year I've tried that we not use sport ed this year. We use the TPSR and cooperative learning, but they're working more with the model. So already from the start, they are in the class, they are working with the model and try to develop a lesson or just an activity based on the model to try to understand the model. But I'm still struggling with, because I think your approach also is good, because then they have experienced it as learners, and then they are learning about learning. And then they can go on later on and learn more about teaching the model. But yeah, I'm still not sure about the modeling.
So Mats, are you using complexity theory in your analysis? I mean, the analysis you're doing Rhizomatic is great. I just wondered if you're drawing on some of the complexity thinking ideas behind your networks you're discussing here.
No, so we used the concept of assemblage in the analysis, and so it's assemblage and rhizomatics throughout the paper.
So there are two major aspects of complexity theory that you just said there. I just wondered if you looked at other aspects of complexity theory to help further analysis, because you're already finishing your dissertation. Right?
Yeah, no.
I'll send you, I have a couple of papers that are very similar to yours, but I just use complexity theory.
Yeah.
So it's, and I use sports ed in the same way you described, with elementary phys ed teachers, with a practicum experience integrated into the course as well.
Yeah.
And like Nicola discussed, I use complexity theory to get them working together in a teacherly role, because they take on roles in the sports ed, but then use that to help them teach elementary school kids in a way where they're not at the center anymore. So they start to realize that teaching phys ed isn't about being really good at it, but creating the conditions for kids to play and get better through the play. So it's an interesting connection to what you've been presenting, I think.
Yeah. So been good.
So does anybody else have any questions for Matt? Okay, so we've been at it for about an hour and 15 minutes. So I have students that are about to come in, and then I'm meeting with Tim here in about another 15 minutes. So who I just answered a door with. So I want to thank Matt. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Interesting paper.
Thank you.
Really interesting. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah,
Like the
thank you.
diversity element.
Are you going to the Castle conference, Matt?
Hopefully,
Oh,
me and Tim Fletcher have discussed it. So hopefully we'll be going together. But yeah, it's on my schedule. That
Mine
should be
too. Hopefully it works.
So if anybody has any questions, is it all right if they email you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we weren't able to discuss the orchestration metaphor, so please send an email if you're interested in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
See you later.